Hello, I'm Peter Whittle. Now, you might have seen this week that the BBC fired one of its employees. This was after it came to light that one Dawn Coeva, who's a senior scheduling coordinator at BBC Three, had written rabidly racist and anti-Semitic posts on her various social media accounts. She called Jewish people a, quote, subcontinental Caucasian invader colonizer species with zero indigenous blood. She went on to call the Holocaust the Holohoax. Amongst her other unhinged rants was one in which she called white people, quote, a barbaric, bloodthirsty, rapacious, murderous, genocidal, thieving, parasitical, deviant breed. Now, in its response to the initial reports in the press, the BBC said, quote, it does not tolerate anti-Semitism, Islamophobia, or any other form of abuse. After apparently investigating her, she was fired. It's interesting, however, that the BBC still had to mention Islamophobia there in that statement, when in this case it was entirely irrelevant. Of course, licensed purveyors had effectively been paying her wages. And the fact remains that the corporation hadn't rooted her out of its own accord. It acted only after reports about her bloodthirsty messages had been published in the papers. Elsewhere, it was business as usual at the BBC. You would think that the appalling acid attack by the asylum seeker Abdul Azidi would present the perfect opportunity to discuss our pathetically inadequate immigration and asylum system, and indeed the total lack of will of our political and media class in doing anything about it. But of course, I'm afraid you'd be wrong. BBC's Newsnight chose instead to frame it entirely in terms of our supposedly misogynistic culture. In their discussion of the case, the Tory MP Caroline Noakes, chair of the Women and Equalities Committee, told Kirsty Walk that more needs to be done to change the culture of abusive behaviour towards women. She said, every day women will face misogyny and microaggressions. We have to do better.
I was surprised to hear how many microaggressions that you face and have always faced.
Oh, look, and I think there's a really important message here, is that with respect, Kirsty, the media, journalists are not interested in microaggressions. They want to hear about the most egregious
I think offences. Some of us want to hear about microaggressions.
And the stark reality is that every day women will face misogyny and microaggressions. If you're a woman of colour, it will be worse. And we have to do better at understanding the cultures that make men think that's okay. It's not okay, and actually you can see a pattern of behaviours that lead to really horrific crimes.
Yes, because it may start with a microaggression, Belle, but it can end up with something incredibly serious.
The fact that the BBC seems to have entirely taken on board and validated the notion of microaggressions, which at its very least is a highly debatable issue, is in itself alarming. Far more, though, in my view, is the implied insult, the slander on British men and British culture, and the complete avoidance of any discussion of the highly misogynistic and patriarchal nature of Islamic societies, which allow such atrocities to take place. Finally, this week we learnt that the sainted BBC sports presenter Gary Lineker, who once compared the government's policies to 1930s Germany, and who recently appeared to endorse the banning of the Israeli football team from an international tournament, had himself had a hand in drawing up the social media guidelines produced by his employer. Now, I long ago stopped watching the BBC, and hence I no longer pay the licence fee. I'm one of hundreds of thousands over the past few years. After it was elected in 2019, this useless Tory government was, we were told, going to get tough on the BBC. There was talk of decriminalising non-payment of the licence fee. Of course, nothing has happened. It goes without saying. Likewise, the BBC's new Director General at the time, Tim Davie, promised to deal with bias at the corporation. Similarly, it would seem, nothing has happened. The ideological framework in which the BBC operates is not just still firmly in place, but is even more overt than before. It informs the stories that it chooses to cover in its news, and indeed how it covers them. It informs the type of comedy shows and drama series it produces. I believe that far from acting as a binding force in this country, the BBC now actively undermines and damages our culture. Like all such public bureaucracies, it is beyond reform. If its political outlook and values are so popular and so cherished, then it should not fear losing its public funding and having to compete with other broadcasters. But lose it must. In the meantime, sending it a message it will understand is quite simple. Just stop watching it. Thank you. Hello. If you're enjoying the New Culture Forum channel and you believe in our mission, may I invite you to join our membership scheme at the link below or on our website, newcultureforum.org.uk. Our work is more important now than ever, and we have great plans ahead for the future, but we can't do it without your support. From as little as £3 per month, you can help ensure that we continue on our mission. As a member, you'll receive a range of benefits, including access to exclusive content, invitations to our private events, including here at our studios, free copies of our books, and much, much more, including, of course, our famous NCF mug. If you aren't able to become a member, then please help us by clicking this button and subscribing to our channel. It's completely free. Just remember to also click the bell icon so that you can get notifications when we post new videos. Thank you.